Okay, so I want to talk about butterflies just for a moment. Stick with me. And I'm not talking about the symbolic kind or whatever, but the actual real butterflies. Okay, so you got your common monarch. That's the one that we all think of when we think of butterflies, the orange and black ones. Then you got your painted ladies, your mourning cloaks, the elusive red admiral. And then there's my favorite, the glass-winged butterfly. And if you ever have seen one of these things are absolutely incredible. And just in case you wanted to know a little bit of interesting trivia about the glass-winged butterfly, which is native to South and Central America, by the way. But they generally have them in various butterfly domes. Have you ever been to one of these things? They're incredible. You could go in, you walk through, and there's butterflies all around. They're one of my favorite places in the world to be. It's an incredible time just being surrounded by all these little interesting fluttering creatures. But the glass-winged butterfly, it has this really incredible camouflage strategy. And rather than using the common cryptic coloration, which is how normal butterflies camouflage, right? The glass-wing butterfly's wings are just simply transparent. They are formed of these unimaginably complex microscopic structures called nanopillars, which are arranged in such a way that they don't reflect any light. So you can see right through them. It's incredible. Like, evolution is amazing. I don't know how long it must have taken these species of butterflies to adapt so that their wings just don't reflect light and predators just see right through it. Don't even know it's there. I love watching butterflies because they're always like fluttering and like they're searching for something. Not really sure what. And there's this cool thing that I love about butterflies. It's probably my favorite thing about them. Is that sometimes when you least expect it, they land on you. And it's not because you wanted them to land on you, not because you were actively reaching for them. And they never land on you when you're chasing them, right? When you're sitting there with your butterfly net as a kid, they never come to you and land on your shoulder. No, they land on you when you're standing still, when you're quiet, when perhaps you aren't even thinking about butterflies. They land on you because they want to land on you, not because you want them to land on you. Your body and mind almost have to be in this certain state of calm and peace for it to happen. Your body must be calm, your mind must be open. And I know I'm making something seemingly mystical out of it. There's probably a very good scientific explanation for all of this. But I would like to think that there is some mysticism behind it. Like, butterflies can sense something about us in the moment that they find us. And that's how I think ideas work. They don't come to you when you're busy or you're chasing money or desperately trying to force a masterpiece, They just tap you on the shoulder when you're sitting in a coffee shop or taking a shower or brushing your teeth or walking down the street or standing in line at the bank. Ideas are just out there, circulating, fluttering around, They're searching for those people who are ready to receive them, not someone who's so frantic and stressed about ready to find them, but someone who is just still enough and calm enough and at peace enough to let them land. And when they land on you, that's when the real work starts. Because the hardest thing about a butterfly resting on your shoulder isn't catching it, it's protecting it. And that's where I want this episode to begin, learning how to protect those ideas from the forces that are seemingly determined to crush them. So I'm at Lofty Coffee in Little Italy in San Diego. It smells of roasted beans and lavender from the candle shop next door, and the kind of coffee pretentiousness that I secretly absolutely love. And across from me, there is a photographer, someone who I respect, someone who's been doing this just as long as I have. He's in town for a shoot, and so we're catching up between gigs. We're talking shop, and we're talking clients about late payments, test shoots, the usual. There's an espresso machine that hisses behind the counter, and people in suits and yoga pants drift in for their morning lattes. And all I can think about is how I want another doppio, or better yet, maybe a flat white. Doppios are seemingly never enough. And I'm talking to him about all this client work and about life and everything going on. And at one point in the conversation, I just happened to mention the podcast. This podcast, as a matter of fact, The Terrible Photographer. And the truth is, I never really know how to talk about it. I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but the word podcast still makes me cringe a little bit. You know, I picture bros in basements talking about crypto and protein shakes and telling misogynistic and homophobic jokes while drinking cheap beer, cosplaying Joe Rogan. But here I am talking about it anyway, and how it's been growing and how people are connecting with it and how it feels good to finally make something that's mine and that I feel like is helpful and productive. And maybe I mentioned the book. Yeah, my book, the one that's coming out. By the way, we're looking like December, available for purchase. Who knows? Maybe sooner. I don't know. Stay tuned. Sign up for the email list. But I digress. So I'm talking about the book. I swear I don't talk about it like that. I just mention it. I just drop it into the conversation. Matter of fact, yeah, I wrote a thing and I'm going to be releasing it in December. And it's pretty cool. I'm really proud of it. And then I see the look on his face. There's this tiny shift. Like I said something offensive, right? Or I fed him some stinky cheese. And his smile, the smile on his face doesn't quite reach his eyes. You know, the smile that I'm talking about. And he says, quote, yeah, I mean, don't you think the podcast space is a little bit saturated already? I mean, how are you planning on monetizing it? In your book? You're going to self-publish? Really? That model is tough, and books don't make any money unless you have a big name already. And I laugh nervously at first and say, yeah, I know. I mean, here's the thing, though. He wasn't speaking out of curiosity, but out of this different place. Like, I know he didn't care. It was more contrarian, maybe. It was a kind of question that sounds practical from the outside, but it lands like a punch to the gut. And I try to explain about building community first and how not everything needs to be this revenue stream immediately, and how I think there is virtue in just making the thing, right? But he's not hearing any of it, I don't think. And he pivots and he looks out the windows there, looks down at his coffee, and he pauses, looks down at his now empty doppio cup, and he says, you know, I had this idea once. In fact, I mean, I still have it. I wanted to make a series of images, a photo book maybe, documentary work about farmers. And I thought this was awesome. I lean in. I'm all about ideas like this. He continued, my dad was a farmer. he said. Grew up in the farm country. I know a lot of farmers who have lost their farms or are losing their farms right now. The whole culture is disappearing and nobody is documenting it. And I can see it like already. I can see the project, the black and white portraits, the weathered hands, the melancholy Midwestern landscapes, rusted machinery, empty silos, the kind of work I think that matters, the kind that lasts. Man, that's incredible, I say. So when are you starting? And that's when I can just see him close up and he gets visibly annoyed. I don't know. There's no time, he says. And who's going to fund it? I've got kids. I've got a mortgage and the business, man. I'm barely keeping up as it is. He lists all these reasons like he's said it before, like he's memorized a script to get time and money and kids. And I'm nodding along, man, thinking those aren't reasons. Those are excuses. And you're making your kids as an excuse for making something incredible. But I don't say that. I just say, yeah, I get it. I get it. But someone should do it. That work needs to exist. And he shrugs, looks out the window. Yeah, maybe, he says. And then he looks back at me and his eyes are changed. There's no curiosity, there's no support, something closer to resentment. He changes the topic. He pivots from himself and his project back to my project. So what makes your podcast different, he asks. There must be a million photography podcasts out there already. What's your angle? And the question sounds kind of reasonable, you know? I've been asked that before. But at this time, it doesn't feel reasonable. Like it wasn't asked in good faith. It feels like a test, like I didn't sign up for. And I try to justify it. My voice, my audience, my purpose, but the air has gone flat. And we kind of stumble and limp through another 10 minutes of conversation, small talk, you know. We finish our coffees, we shake hands, and we say goodbye. We walk outside in the 11 a.m. San Diego sunlight just feels too bright. And I'm not just deflated. I'm sad. Yeah, I'm sad for me because my thing just got shit on in the most passive-aggressive way possible. But I'm also sad for him, you know? Because that photo book, the one about the farmers in the Midwest, the one about his dad, that would have been stunning, beautiful. And it's never going to exist. Not because it was a bad idea, not because he lacks talent. He's an amazing photographer. But because he's already decided it's too late and it's too hard and it's too risky. And I'm standing there waiting to cross the road, watching him walk away down to his rental car, and I realized something. He wasn't trying to kill my idea. He was actually mourning his own. My name is Patrick Four, and this is the Terrible Photographer podcast, where we have honest conversations about creativity and identity and discovering your voice. Today's episode is number 33, and I'm calling it, Yeah, Maybe. And look, if this is the first time you're here, I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to talk about regret, execution, and ideas. But it's not what you think. Or maybe it is, I don't know. We'll figure it out together over the course of the next, 30 minutes or so. It's not really about other people trying to pull you down, or at least not just that. It's about what happens when ideas land on the wrong person at the right time, or perhaps all the right person at the wrong time. Or when an idea comes to you and taps you on the shoulder and whispers in your ear and makes your heart beat a little faster, and you ignore it because you're too busy or too tired or too scared or whatever, and then it flies away and finds somebody else. And then years later, when someone else shows up excited about their thing, you can't celebrate with them. Not because you're a bad person, but because their excitement reminds you of the thing that you didn't do. And that hurts. And so you diminish it, you poke holes in it, you ask practical questions that sound like wisdom, but feel like sabotage. Not consciously, not maliciously, but inevitably. Because here's what I've learned about all of this. Ideas really do have a life of their own. They don't wait for you to be ready when you say, yeah, maybe, instead of, fuck yes, let's go. They leave. When you let them go, they haunt you for years and years to come. So today, let's talk about that cost of regret. The people who stopped saying yes, the ones who are so haunted by what they didn't make, that when a butterfly lands on someone else's shoulders, they feel compelled to swat it away. So I talk to a lot of photographers and a lot of creatives. And when this topic of personal work or test shoots come up, the projects that never pay, but I feel absolutely matter, I get some responses. Sometimes they either feel guilty or they list a dozen reasons why they can't. And I get it. Life takes over and creativity starts to feel extra. You got extra time, you got extra money, and it takes extra effort. But I've learned that there's a difference between somebody who's tired and somebody who's haunted. Tired people say this, man, I'm just so tired and exhausted. That really sounds amazing. I'm so happy for you. But haunted people, they poke holes. Tired people are depleted, right? They need rest. But when they recover, they're there again. They are back up on that horse, ready to try again. But haunted people have convinced themselves that trying is pointless, not because they're lazy, but because that they once said no to an idea or failed at an idea that never came back. And now it rattles the walls of their creative house. And something haunting doesn't look like giving up. It looks like perfection in disguise. So I've got this friend. She's insanely talented, who's had this personal test shoot idea for years. Desert, exotic animals, contour styling, agency models, of Vogue level production, incredible vision. But it's so incredible, she'll probably never do it. Because when your idea gets this big, this expensive, this unreachable, it becomes a shield. It lets you say, I can't start yet, instead of admitting you're too scared to start at all. And every time she talks about this vision, about this shoot that she wants to do, you can tell it still lights her up, you know? It's also, though, her excuse. The dream has become a cage. And here's the thing about haunted people. Whether they're paralyzed by perfectionism or buried by excuses, eventually they all start to sound the same, eventually. They ask questions like, how are you going to monetize it? Isn't the market oversaturated? What makes your project different? Those questions, again, they sound like wisdom, but they're not. They're a defensive mechanism, a way to validate giving up. Because I would argue, if they can convince you not to try, they don't have to face the ghost of their own inaction. Here's what I realized walking out of that coffee shop in downtown San Diego. My friend didn't dismiss this podcast, because he thought it was a bad idea. He dismissed it because I was doing something that he wished he had done. I'm not talking about this podcast, right? Just the act of doing something, of saying fuck it and making something anyway, of finishing, right? And his farmer photo book, that's not just a lost project. It's a ghost that's haunting him. It follows him everywhere, whispering, you could have done this too, but you didn't. And instead of facing that pain, he's projected it onto me. And that realization, I think, hit harder than the critique itself, because it meant the thing that hurt me wasn't his words. It was the reflection. I was looking at what giving up could look like in 5, 10 years if I stopped saying yes. Okay, look, I'm not innocent to this. I have my own graveyard. I've got ideas that I loved and let die. So there's this photo essay that I never shot about my hometown, Freeport, Illinois. Population, 26,000, probably less now. It was a factory town, the kind of place that peaked probably in the 60s and 70s and has been slowly deflating ever since, like a punctured tire that no one bothered to fix. It's a strange place, Freeport. I didn't think so growing up. No kid ever does. It was just home. But I haven't lived there in 20-ish years, and distance gives you some clarity, or at least gives you the uncomfortable ability to see what you couldn't see when you were inside of it. How much of a bubble it was, how it felt like it was stuck in time, not in a charming, nostalgic way, and the rest of the world has moved on and we're staying here kind of way. But last year I went back. I was in Chicago for a shoot. I was in town for a few days and I had some time, so I figured I would drive out west to 2 hours to see the place where I grew up one more time, maybe for the last time, who knows. And here's the thing about going back to places you used to call home. It's never what you quite remember, Not because the place has changed that much, though it has. Of course, everything does, but because you have changed. And that gap between who you were and who you are now makes the world feel like a strange stage set that you're visiting after the show has closed. So the last time that I was in Freeport, my daughter, Lucy, was still in diapers, about 9 months old. And we were visiting my parents at their house, the house that I grew up in, still feeling like home base, a place that I could return to. This time, though, my parents had retired to New Mexico, sold the house, some new family living there now, probably have repainted my old bedroom. I really hope that they repainted my old bedroom, tore out the carpet. I really do hope they tore out the carpet that I used to lie on as a kid, listening to music, staring at the ceiling, convinced I was the only person who understood what loneliness felt like. Spoiler, it wasn't. For the first time, though, in my life, I felt like a visitor to my hometown, a stranger. And so there I was, driving through this town in a rented, shiny new BMW SUV, because of course the rental agency upgraded me. And of course I felt absolutely ridiculous driving something that expensive through a town where most people drove 10-year-old Fords. And the whole thing just felt like a dream. It was very surreal. That feeling when you're somewhere familiar, but it doesn't quite click anymore. Like your brain knows the shape of the streets, but can't quite place why it matters. I drove past my old high school. It was still there. It still looks like my old high school, except somehow smaller. Drove past the Union Dairy where I had my first real date when I was 15. I drove through the park where my friends and I used to play tag and play baseball in the summers. And every landmark felt like a little ghost. And I'm sitting there in my rented BMW, idling on a stoplight on Stevenson Street. And I remembered I once had this idea. My own photo essay, a portrait series I was going to call Icons from My Hometown. And these aren't famous people on a national or international scale. They're not celebrities that you know their names, right? But these are people who were big deals in Freeport. They mattered in my hometown. As I like to say, the large fish in the small pond that is Freeport. Teachers who everyone remembered, the business owners who had been running the same shop for 40 years, the guy who coached Little League for 3 generations of kids, the librarian who knew every kid by name and always had a book recommendation, the people who made up the collective consciousness of the town, the ones whose names you would hear at the grocery store or at church or at the high school football games, the people whose funerals would shut down Main Street and get everyone talking. I had this whole project mapped out. I was going to rent a storefront, one of the many empty ones on Main Street in downtown. And there are so many empty ones. It's really sad. I was going to make it a kind of a makeshift temporary portrait studio, spend a week or 2 there and just making work. I was going to put out a call. I was going to invite a bunch of people and I was going to shoot portraits. I was going to sit with them. I was going to record their stories. Not super polished, not super glamorous, just really honest, you know? Old school portraits, like a warm canvas backdrop, simple wooden stool. Let their faces tell the story. And then I would pair each portrait with a short essay, maybe video about who they were and what they've been doing and what they've built and what they meant to the people around them. Like a love letter to a dying town, or at least a record of it before it was actually gone. Maybe I wanted to prove that the place that raised me, but broke me a little too, still mattered. That the people who stayed behind in this town weren't invisible just because the world stopped paying attention. But here's the thing. I never made it. I never did it. Not because it wasn't a good idea. I still think it's a great fucking idea. I knew it then and I know it now. But I told myself the same shit we all tell ourselves. I don't have time. I'll do it later. I don't have the money to travel. I need to figure out the funding. Who would even care about this stuff? And so this idea just sat there in my notebook, in my head, circling, waiting. But now I think it's too late. Not because I couldn't do it. I could do it technically, but it wouldn't be the same. Mr. Somerville, my English teacher, the one who taught me how to write, he's now teaching in Oregon. Coach Chance, who ran the youth basketball program, passed away. The guy who ran the record store, the one who let me hang out in his shop, moved to Arizona. I don't even know if he's still alive. And I won't even tell you about what happened to the history teacher who was the Abraham Lincoln reincarnator, the one who was loved by everyone. That is until his own demons made an appearance. And let's just say after his time in prison is secluded to shame for the rest of his life. Wow, that went dark. It wasn't just a photo project. It was a record, a version of the town that's disappearing. Not just because people die, though people do, of course, everyone does, but because the whole culture is fading. The kind of place where people knew each other, you know, where your reputation mattered, where you couldn't fuck up too badly because everyone would know by Sunday, for better or for worse. Mostly worse, though. And honestly, small towns can be suffocating. They're judgmental, they're cruel in quiet ways. There is a reason why I left when I did. But also, there's something there. There's something real, a sense of place, of belonging, of mattering. And I wanted to document it. Not to romanticize it, not to turn it into some bullshit nostalgic fairy tale, but just record it, the truth. So that someone someday could look at those faces and read these stories and say, oh, yeah, that's what it was like. But I didn't. I sat on the idea. I told myself I'd get to it. And now it's archaeology. I could still shoot portraits of people in Freeport, sure, but it's not the same. It's not urgent anymore. It's not alive. It's more reconstruction, nostalgia, grief disguised as art, which still can be beautiful, but it's not what I actually wanted to make. So I'm sitting there at the stoplight, my BMW engine idling, Apple Music playlist on shuffle, playing some sort of melancholy indie bullshit that felt too on the nose for the moment. And I realized something. Ideas have shelf life. They always start fresh, urgent, necessary. But if you leave them out on the counter for too long, these ideas, they start to stink. Not because they were bad, but because the moment had passed. The window is closed and you missed it. And so when my friend tells me about his farmer photo book, the one about his dad, the one that would have mattered, I'm not judging him from some moral high ground. I'm mourning the project with him because I know exactly what he lost. Not the project itself, but the version of himself who would have made it. The version who still believed. The version who hadn't yet learned to ignore butterflies when they land on your shoulder. That version is gone and you can't get it back. And I drove out of Freeport that day, back to Chicago, back to O'Hare, back to the rental return desk, and back to my flight home to San Diego. And I haven't been back since. And maybe I never will. And that photo essay from my hometown, it's in the graveyard now. It's a ghost. It's rattling its chains whenever I see someone finishing something that I didn't start, whispering, you could have done this, but you didn't. And now it's too late. And here's the real problem, friends. When you have a graveyard full of ideas you didn't follow through on, you start to resent people who do. Not consciously sometimes, in a way that you would ever admit, but the resentment is there and it leaks out in passive-aggressive comments, in questions, in skepticism disguised as realism. In just being practical, you become someone who kills butterflies on other people's shoulders because you can't stand to watch them fly. Okay, so not everyone who asks tough questions is haunted. Sometimes it's because they care. So a few months ago, I told my wife, Jamie, that I was thinking about relaunching my graphic design business, not giving up on photography, just resurrecting the branding side. I was excited. I was talking fast as I do. I was painting the vision, stability, creative control, fewer dry spells in my business. And in my head, I was already off to the races. Logos and names and landing pages, all of it. My brain loves a creative escape disguised as a plan. And she listened, then said one word, babe. And I know that tone. Are you launching a new business because you actually want to do design? She asked. Or because you're running from photography because it's hard right now? Okay, that was a gut punch. She just laid it all out. The unfinished systems, the rates I hadn't raised, the things that I had been avoiding. Before you resurrect a second business, she said, maybe finish building the first one. She wasn't poking holes out of regret. She was protecting me from myself, from my ADHD brain chasing a new dopamine hit instead of fixing what's broken. And it took me years to understand that difference, that the care that can sound like skepticism and regret can sound like advice. You see, haunted people, they ask questions to protect themselves. But people who care about you ask questions to protect you. Haunted people point out problems and leave you with them. But people who care point out problems and help you solve them. So, I didn't launch the design agency, not because it was a bad idea. I think it was a pretty good idea, but because when I sat with it, I realized I didn't want to do design again. I was frustrated with design work, the mind games, the rounds of revisions, how clients don't trust you. They just want you to do what they say, which are all reasons why I got out of the game in the first place. Why I actually dove headfirst into photography so many years ago. I guess I just wanted photography, my business, to feel easier. And so starting something new wouldn't fix that. So instead, I guess I'm starting to fix what I already have. And that's the difference between being haunted and being cared for. One leaves you stuck, the other moves you forward. Okay, so here's what friction does in physics. We're going to have a little science lesson, shall we? It converts kinetic energy into heat, motion into waste. And that's exactly what happens when you share excitement with haunted people. Your momentum gets converted into defensiveness. Your creative energy burns off as anxiety. That thing that should propel you forward gets dissipated as heat, explaining yourself, justifying your choices, defending your right to try. And friction is cumulative. A single, yeah, maybe, doesn't stop you. One skeptical question about monetization won't derail you. But here's the thing, friends. Friction compounds. Each conversation, each quote practical concern, each reminder that the market is saturated, it adds up. And over time, you're not moving forward anymore. You're just generating heat. And most of the haunted people in your life, they are not villains. They are good people carrying ghosts. And then there's this other kind of haunting, the kind that looks like silence. I have this friend who doesn't acknowledge anything that I make. It's weird. The podcast milestones, the book launch, the features, nothing. And at first I thought she just didn't care. But I've realized that this level of ignoring me, it takes effort. It's not apathy, it's active avoidance. Because if she admitted she saw it, she would have to feel the gap between what she's doing and what she wishes she was. And so She stays quiet when I talk about it, pretends not to notice. And silence can be its own form of friction. It doesn't tell you to be quiet, but it makes you wonder if what you're doing even matters in the first place. And then, and I didn't even really understand this one, there are people who have everything they need to get started, right? They got time, they got gear, they got talent, they might even have money. And they just don't. I have friends like this. They could be making incredible work. They have the resources, the skills, but they're not. And I don't know if that's contentment or fear. I don't know if I'm supposed to respect it or worry about it. And from the outside, it kind of looks like wasted potential, like someone is sitting on a green light and never hits the gas. But maybe they're genuinely at peace. Or maybe it's easier to call it peace than to admit that they're actually scared. Either way, they're not moving. And you can't hitch your momentum to parked cars. So how do you protect your butterflies? How do you distinguish between tired and haunted? If they're tired, you give them grace. If they're haunted, you guard your ideas. You build a go list, not a no list. Most want to know. Few want to go. Share early ideas only with the ones who match your energy. It took me so long to figure this one out. Stop asking for permission. Make the thing. Ship it. Adjust based on reality, not on other people's fear. Name the regret when you see it. And if someone reacts with skepticism, ask the simple question. Is it the idea, or is this bringing something up for you? 9 times out of 10, it's their ghost talking. You need to get comfortable with loneliness because ambition is lonely. Not because you're better, but because you're not done yet. Pretending you are just to fit in, that's actually betrayal of yourself, of the work that shows you. There's this quote by Seth Godin that I love. The only thing worse than starting something and failing is not starting something at all. I think about this quote a lot because I think most of us are absolutely terrified of failure, of making the thing and it not working. But we're not nearly scared enough of regret, of spending decades with ghosts of things that we didn't try, of becoming the person who pokes holes in someone else's excitement because we can't bear to watch them do what we never did. Okay, so this week's Light Leak, I want you to make 2 lists. I know, and hear me, this might sound a little harsh, but it's been helpful for me to know who to share my ideas with. Not because I don't care about them, but because I can predict how they'll react. Whether they'll be curious and ask questions in good faith, or let's be honest, they'll shit on it. And we all know people in both categories. So I want us to name them, to actually write their names down. Who are they? Don't worry, this list is private. It's just for you. You don't have to share it. The first list that I want you to create is called The Haunted. And the people who are on this list are the people who respond to excitement with, yeah, maybe, or how will you monetize it? They're the ones who are apathetic, who display zero interest, who suck the joy out of ideas, who smother your excitement with their skepticism, who use your ideas as an opportunity to talk about their own ideas, but never make the thing or take the risk. They are just trying to emotionally piggyback on your thing. Anyone who makes you feel like shit when you walk away from talking to them. These people aren't necessarily villains, but they don't get access to your butterflies, to your best ideas, to your projects. Okay, list 2. These are the ones who finish, who ship, who say fuck yes and offer help instead of obstacles. And look, sometimes these people aren't actively building something themselves, but they're curious and they care about you. They want to see you succeed. These are your cheerleaders, the ones in your corner when times are dark. They're very, very important. And then there are actual builders, the ones who have made things, built businesses, completed projects. These people are rare. Learn from them. But just one warning about them. There are people who appear to be on this list, but are actually grifters, emotionally, financially grifters, looking to sell you something or steal from you or just ride on your success. Watch out for those people. They are real. Okay, so here's the hardest part. Stop pitching to list 1. Stop talking about your best ideas, your projects. Stop sharing your excitement, your joy about what you're doing because it's falling on deaf ears. They're just going to suck the joy out of it. They're going to suck the fun out of it, and they're going to make you feel like shit. They're going to make you second guess your own choices and your own decisions. You need to guard your ideas, your projects, your joy. You need to guard your butterflies. Feed them to only people who believe in you and what you are doing. Okay, so in closing, I never told my photographer friend any of this. We finished our coffee, we shook hands, and we said goodbye. We said we'd stay in touch. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I guess it doesn't matter. But I left Lofty Coffee in San Diego that day carrying 2 things. 1, this important reminder to protect my work from people who are haunted by theirs. And 2, this deep, sad, profound ache for a photo book about farmers that will never exist. Because here's what I truly believe. And I'm still trying to believe it on days when I'm sitting in parking lots questioning everything. Ideas are alive. They're not just abstract concepts floating in the ether, waiting for us to pluck them out of thin air like apples from a tree. They're living things with their own urgencies and timelines. And when one lands on you and it whispers in your ear, and when it makes you feel that little flutter of what if, that means that it's choosing you. And it's not random and it's not by accident, but because there's something inside of you that is ready or could be ready or needs to be ready. And you have a choice, my friends. You can say yes. You can clear the space, make the time, take the risk, find the money, and build a thing, even though it's scary and messy and it might not work. Or you can swat it away. Tell it you're too busy, you're too tired, you're too late. Tell it the market's too saturated, the ROI isn't clear. Whatever the excuse feels safe that day. And that's fine. It'll leave. It'll find someone else. someone hungrier, someone less comfortable, someone who hasn't built a graveyard. And if you let it fly away, it doesn't just disappear. It'll haunt you. And years later, when you're sitting across from someone who's excited about their own thing, you won't be able to celebrate it fully with them. You'll ask practical questions. You'll point out obstacles. You'll say, yeah, maybe, when you should say, fuck yes. Not because you're a bad person, but because their butterfly reminds you of the one that you let go. And that hurts. And so you try to kill theirs, to validate your own inaction, to prove that giving up was the smart choice, but it wasn't. It never is. So ever since my coffee conversation with my photographer friend, I've been thinking about his farmer photo book idea, the one that my friend will probably never make. And I wonder, what if he had said yes when the idea had landed on him, you know? What if he had made it messy, honest, started small, shot maybe one farmer and then another and built it over time? What if he had been okay with it taking years even, with it not making any money at all, with it being imperfect? That book would exist. And maybe it would have changed something, you know, for him, for his community, for the people who needed to see their lives honored in that way. It would have started a larger conversation that needs to be had. But it won't. Because he said, yeah, maybe. And yeah, maybe it's the sound of a butterfly dying. So here's what I'm trying to do. When a butterfly lands on my shoulder, I want to be the person who says, fuck, yes, let's go. Even when I'm tired, even when I'm scared, even when I'm busy, even when I don't have the money, even when the practical questions start piling up in my head like dirty dishes. Because ambition might be a lonely orbit, cold, quiet, nobody waving from the window. But it's the only one where butterflies can still find you. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not next year, but one day I will look back and realize an idea chose me and I said yes. And I kept saying yes, even when people were shaking their heads and asking how I would monetize it and reminding me that the market was saturated. And that thing that I made, the one that scared the shit out of me, it's real now. It's alive. It's out there in the world doing the work that it's supposed to be doing. And nobody, not the haunted, not the skeptics, not the ones carrying ghosts, not even the people I love who are just trying to protect me from getting hurt. Nobody can take that away. The butterfly landed, and I didn't swat it away. I walked out of Lofty Coffee that day, stood on the San Diego sidewalk in that bright sunlight, and made a choice. I am not going to live haunted. I'm going to build, even if I build alone, even if nobody understands, even if it's messy and imperfect and doesn't make money. Because the only thing worse than failing at the thing that you tried is succeeding at convincing yourself not to try at all. And ending up decades later, sitting in a coffee shop, telling someone else that their thing probably won't work, while your ghosts rattle in chains in the background, asking, what if you had just said yes? Thanks for being here, friends. Until next Tuesday, stay curious, stay courageous, and yeah, stay terrible.